Hello again, it's Lauren Koch from Keeper of the Old Ways. Coming back to you again with some musings and ramblings, and I hope you get some little golden nuggets out of it. But as a lot of you already know, I am hosting and leading a Artist Way cohort. It started off this week. We're just getting started with the introductions and the basic tools that are needed and everything. And part of that is morning pages, is a journaling practice where you write like subconscious writing, flow writing, 3 pages minimum. She doesn't specify what size pages. I typically just use my refillable journal that I got back in high school that I just absolutely love. If you haven't seen, I don't know if you can see it very well. I'll post a better picture of it. I love Oberon Designs. Their leather work is just absolutely phenomenal, and I've gotten a lot of wear and tear out of this, and it still looks as good as new. But aside from promo that just randomly happened, I was going through all of the process of this like subconscious writing, and just sort of reflecting on my journey the past couple of years and some of the things that, because it's actually been, let's see, since March of this year, that I've taken a couple of notes and stuff from like sessions I've had with other people, readings from pastoral counseling and stuff like that. But the last time I truly wrote a journal entry was in March of this year, which is 2023. And a lot of people, some of my clients and stuff, have been dealing with just being able to pick up where they left off. And I find that is so crucial when we are creatives, that we not make it this big production, basically. Because though our skills have been lying dormant, they're still there. We might be a little rusty in some areas, but it doesn't take much to get back in the swing of things, especially if you were very proficient in something. For me, it's like playing the piano. I did intensive classical training from the time I was, I started when I was 7, but by the time I was 12, I was intensively studying classical piano. And I did that until I was around 25, I guess. And at that time, I say I had my, quarter life crisis or whatever, where I was dealing with a lot of chronic pain issues. And I'm sure I've mentioned this before, but I've had tendonitis issues, some brain trauma and stuff like that made it inaccessible for me to finish my music degree. And in many ways, it wasn't the right path for me anyway. And I'm slowly starting to understand that. And it's all relevant to what I'm about to talk about. Because in life, we have many detours. We have many curves that, curveballs that are thrown at us. And a lot of times we start to think that life is happening to us rather than for us. You've probably heard that several times, that things happen for you, not to you. And it's really about a mindset, like being able to understand how important that is, especially as conscious co-creators with the universe, with God, that we aren't just randomly floating out here and everything is fated, that we actually have free will and we can literally influence our experience. We can make our lives as miserable as we want. Like I've been talking about with the affirmations and stuff like that, it's easy to reaffirm over and over and over again how awful we are. But it's harder for us to start moving into, hey, you're awesome, you've got this, you're beautiful, you're strong, you know, all of those things. It's really hard for us to start moving into that when we have all this negative self-talk, right? And so as I was unpacking all of that and moving through some of the things, I had an epiphany about, or rather just processing of excuses. We try to make excuses for why we are experiencing a certain thing. And sometimes they're quite valid. But if we really, like in my case, I'm like, why have I been such a perfectionist, people pleaser? And I have this long list of, I could blame this person, I could blame this instance, this situation, all of these things. But in the end, it comes down to my mindset, period. Pure and simple. And it's not how I was raised. It was not my education. It's not my struggles to get into college because I was not accepted in academia because I was actually homeschooled. K through 12, a wonderful program that my aunt helped me get through. She was my main teacher. We did the Becca video program, so it was like I was basically sitting in a classroom on a video, and she would, you know, work through stuff. Like she was the proctor basically. And it's just like, is it that, you know, that experience of, and the reason why I'm bringing these correlations is because I was listening to another podcast. It was a little bit remedial for me because it was how to gain more confidence on social media as an entrepreneur. That ship sailed basically, but it's always great to have a refresher, especially when I'm working with clients that are going through the same thing. And it's always good to hear. That's the Localpreneur podcast by Leslie Presnall. I'll put it in the comments or whatever. It's a really good digestible podcast that, you know, really helps you figure out, or at least gives you guidelines of how to become the local go-to in your area. And I've just been really enjoying it. I think she's from Alabama or Mississippi, I don't know, but it's funny just hearing another Southern gal go through stuff. But she was talking about how when she was in grade school, she understood inherently that she would graduate high school. Even though she didn't have the skill levels at that time to be able to graduate high school at that point in time, she knew that it was inevitable, right? Whereas with me, it was a little bit different. Like, I was testing higher than state standards. I was doing a lot of things that were above average. I was extremely smart. All the things that most neurodivergent people are. We have multiple, you know, we're just hard workers, and we can do a lot of things really well. But besides that, with the homeschooling in the state of Georgia at that time, it was extremely hard to get accreditation and be accepted into colleges and stuff like that. And so when I graduated high school, I got the SAT. I went and got a GED, thinking that would make it easier to get into colleges because, you know, I had this paper score and everything like that. And regardless of how high my GPA was, how high my SAT scores were, how high my GED scores were and stuff, it did not matter to this college that I was applying to. And we were being made to jump through all kinds of hoops, and it was just like, why are you doing this when it's very clear that, I am a competent person? And they're like, well, you have, basically I was having to prove myself. They had all these, there was so many stigmas around homeschooling at that time, and for good reason, I understand that. But in order to just even get a provisional attendance, at that time, this was back in 2009, I guess, and I had even taken off time between high school and undergrad to sort of get my direction in life sorted out and figure out. So I was coming in at like 20, 21. I was already older than some of the other students coming in. And I knew I wanted to do music and art. That's all I knew. And I'm like, okay, tell me what I can do to make you accept me. And they sent me for a test and stuff like that, and they're like, if you can do this without studying or anything tomorrow, we'll accept you. They had to eat their words because I passed the test and I was in, but it was still on a very provisional attendance type thing. I had to still continue to prove myself. And then of course, I ended up graduating on the honor roll and all kinds of stuff, both in undergrad and grad school. So it's like, it's all of these things. I could use that as an excuse, as well as the late diagnosis of my scoliosis and neurodivergency and learning disabilities and stuff like that, that were never made a focus in my life, or also not identified. But basically, the word can't was not in our vocabulary. My aunt, she would often say, if I was like struggling with something and I'd say, I can't do that, she would say, can't is not in our vocabulary. And somewhere along the way, I internalized that as being that failure is not an option. And in reality, that was not what she was doing at all. But somehow, in all of that, it got into the mix, and I integrated it into like my core identity, I guess. And so then when it came to college, I had that fake it till you make it attitude, because I was so convinced I didn't belong there because no one wanted me, and I was constantly having to prove myself and stuff like that. And it's like, as I was writing this, I was like, you know what? It's easy. I'm just trying to look at some of the writings. It's easy to try to blame others for what has happened or what we're experiencing. But in the end, it's our ego, our inner critic, that is telling us that, is trying to make us not take responsibility for what has happened. And in all of these instances, I made choices that led to the culminate, like this building and building on top of each other. And so it's like, there's no one thing that really made me turn into this perfectionist people pleaser, totally bending over backwards trying to help people and just getting hurt along the way. It was because my ego was telling me that if I just strive hard enough, if I work hard enough, if I prove myself to these people, then I will be accepted and I will, just slide under the radar. And that's not possible, basically, with me. And that's, the ego is trying to get us to not take accountability for our own actions, our own role that we play inside of all of this. And I've been having some very deep conversations with my partner about that, because it also pops up in my private life and interactions with friends, family, whatever, because I am so sure that it can't possibly be me. Why are all these external forces causing me to feel overwhelmed? And it's because I chose to take on way too many projects. It's because I can't say no, those things. And so it's like shifting that and removing some of that, the accessibility to have excuses, to put blame on something else that's external and not take accountability, which is something that our society is lacking a lot of. Something that I've seen a lot within, especially the grade school to collegiate age, like 6 to 26. It varies, of course, and even, well-mature adults have issues with accountability as well. But what is happening is society has made it to the point where there's always someone there that you can blame. There's always someone there that it's their fault and they need to fix it and not you. And that was completely opposite of what, how I was raised and the reality of the world. We have to take responsibility for ourselves. And through that, we have to take responsibility for the actions and our experience as well. So within all of that, how can we start shifting these excuses and acknowledge them for what they are? That we're just trying to blame others or situations for what we're experiencing, right? And part of that is getting very still and silent and sort of playing connect the dots. And it can be tough as things are revealed to us, as things are very uncomfortable. And I'm just processing a lot. We have to, sometimes my brain goes on squirrel trails and it doesn't come back. It goes on vacation. So I will reiterate, we make excuses to make ourselves feel comfortable and to hand over accountability. And what we have to do is get real with the cause of it. And it's like, just like, I'm trying to draw correlations between these different things that have happened, even generational trauma or childhood trauma that I'm not even sure I can process what has happened. Yes, it's happened to me, but it's also happened because there's a lesson in it. I was listening to the Sounds True podcast, and they were interviewing a guy named Light Watkins, I believe, and he has a new book out called Traveling Light. It's a minimalist approach to spirituality or something, and he brought in some really important context around that. And from the fact of like, we need to discard and some of the earthly things that are like weighing us down, and that really ties in really well with what we're experiencing externally in the world right now, right? And he was talking about how we, again, blank. I must need to go get some food or something. But anyway, how when we are constantly searching for that outer excuse, we're not tying into the reality of why that happened. And that was it. Why the thing happened in reality was so that we could add another tool to our tool belt, right? So all of these life experiences are happening so that we can better serve our community. We can better show up when we have some sticky situation that comes up. And it was really cool because he mentioned in Aliens and just movies in general, how something is highlighted or vaguely, you're seeing it at the beginning of the movie. And in this indication, he was like, think of Sigourney Weaver in Aliens, where she's, moving cargo around with this large suit, this mechanical suit, and she's learning very stiltily, how to manipulate this large machinery. And then it was kind of forgotten about, but it was creating a foundation, a stepping stone for something that she was able to manipulate and use later in the movie to actually fight the alien mother, right? And so that's what this situation is we are, all the situations, all the things that we have had happen in our lives were for us to become the person that we are today and who we will be in the future. And we are able to take those lessons, hopefully we've learned them, and then we can apply it in the future to whatever situation that comes up, right? And I feel like that within taking excuses and trying to cast blame, I see this a lot within the burnout culture, within chronic pain and disabilities and stuff like that, is a lot of people dwell in the negative side of that, and instead of like curating their life around the thing and then showing up despite it, they sort of wallow in the situation. And I've always, it's kind of like star charts and stuff like that. Some people take and make their star chart their whole identity, and it's only sort of a blueprint or an outline, and it doesn't speak to who you actually are and your actual personal experiences in life. And that includes the formation of the inner critic, because who we are truly and authentic, with our most authentic self within our body, is something completely different than what is usually shown to the world, what has become our identity. Because our inner critic, the same thing that forms our identity forms our inner critic, and that is outside external experiences. On the timer, sorry about that. I've been talking too much. We're not moving enough. The inner critic and our social outer identity is formed by our influences in our life, which are our peers, our parents, our teachers, right? And it starts forming at a very young age, and we often suppress who and what we are at our most authentic self so that we better fit into society, right? And a lot of times we're shunned or not necessarily accepted if we differ from the norm, right? And so that's been one of my, main things to process as I've been slowly being diagnosed with certain health issues, the scoliosis. I had, during the middle of grad school, it almost completely derailed me, similar to the issues with my tendonitis and stuff like that, because it completely, sorry, there was someone calling. I'm on my phone. It had completely taken away who I thought I was and stomped on it, if that makes sense. When you lose a piece of yourself, you have to refine who you are and what you are in this new person, this new place and identity that you are, right? And so that's what, when I see other people that are in burnout, like I'm hopefully, that's not wood, it was metal, but knock on wood, that I am in recovery, like active burnout recovery at this point in time. And it's very easy for me to lose buoyancy and shift toward the other end. And that's what I have to keep working on. But it's all of my doing in that. Yes, there's external factors, because everyone's always going to have their hand out and they're always going to be taking, and asking for more. And you have to have strong boundaries around that. And you have to tell yourself no also. And the same thing within what Light Watkins was talking about, was he was talking about how we can have hell yeses. We can have those, oh, that sounds good, because we want to follow the dopamine. We want to follow that fun, exciting thing. But as very multi-passionate people, sometimes we can, whether you're neurodivergent, whether you're creative, or whether you're all of the above, we can overextend ourselves very easily, and everything seems like a hell yeah, because it's in our wheelhouse, right? But what we have to do is start following that intuition, the heart voice, as they were calling it, and start really sitting and listening. I think I mentioned that earlier in the video, that we have to sometimes just sit in silence and get comfortable with ourselves, right? And that's part of being a creative. We actually have to have quiet time so our head can process all the experiences we've been having, and then it percolates. I always tell my students, creation is cyclical. We have to have an exploration phase and a gathering phase, and then we have to have a percolation and a infusing stage where it's all processing and everything, and then we can move back into creation. And it ebbs and flows, and that's something that's not really taught per se in academia, because it's all about the grade, it's all about pushing forward, it's all about making a deadline. And in the life of a professional artist or freelance graphic designer or whatever, that does dictate your schedule. But if you are trying to make art for yourself or for fun or for whatever, then you'll see that. And as a professional artist, if you're even just making your own body of work, you can't constantly be in go mode. You can't always be in creation mode, because that's how you reach burnout, basically. And he was talking about, like Watkins was talking about, how in that space you learn to discern that the scary yes, the nervous, anxious excitement is your intuition, and that the more that you play with listening to it, the louder and louder and more clear it will get. And it's very true, and that's even within intuitive spiritual downloads and stuff like that. The quieter you get, the more you sit with it, and the more you flex. It's like a muscle. The more you flex following your intuition and listening to the divine guidance and stuff like that, the more you'll hear it, the more it will be revealed to you. So we talked about accountability. We talked about how excuses and blaming other people for what has happened to us holds us back. And how we can get still and start processing the role of the ego in our lives. And I know I took several different detours and roundabout, but I hope that something within all of that felt true and aligned and resonated with you in some way, because there is so much to be said for accepting what has happened and also acknowledging your role in what has happened. Because it's very easy for our ego to try to protect us and say, surely it wasn't me, and deflect what has happened to being someone else's or some other thing's fault, external to you. But when we actually start accepting and identifying our role in the situation, that's when we find true power and we can start making progress, because then we can find the traits of what keeps happening and cycling back around and back around and back around, because we didn't learn the lesson the first time. Sometimes we don't like learning the lessons. And this could be applied to relationships. People in abusive relationships, they have a type and they fall back into, it's just a different person, but it's the same, personality and stuff like that. So this can apply in many, many different ways. But yeah, let me know what felt true in any of this. DM me, talk to me in the comments, whatever. And because I know other people are experiencing this, and I hope that something in this touched you in some form or fashion and had a light bulb moment, because it is very easy to try to blame and find external reasons why we are still suffering, because we do not want to accept that as ours. And indeed it is our burden to bear, but we can set it to the side, because the next moment is a totally new moment. The next day is a totally new day, and we can just keep moving forward and growing and learning new things, right? So with that, I'll leave you with some homework of sorts to try to sit in stillness and think of all the things that you have experienced and have just wanted to scream and beat the wall and be upset about, that you actually, sit for a moment and say, where was my role in this? How could I have reacted differently? How could I safeguard myself, have better boundaries in the space to be able to then start shifting that mindset of things didn't happen to me, they happened for me. Okay? So, I'll leave you with that. Have a great day.